Keep it simple, Phil. You know that. Keep it simple.
There's something to be said for that. Absolutely. And it's not easy to resist the layers and the complexity. And
Exactly.
yeah.
So welcome to. I feel that I can it may seem like only a few hours that we've engaged, but I'm going to introduce you as a beautiful friend, as a mentor, even though I've not been, you could say, in your presence for many hours, but just the hours that I have been, what I've read from you, I see you as a real support to me, a guide, a friend, and even just picking up on your sharings on social platforms and so on. So welcome today to another beautiful, transparent conversation. Welcome, Philip Shepherd.
Thank you. And I gotta say that, I feel that friendship. I feel your heart so full and open and ready for life. And I just connect with that right away.
Beautiful. So we are at a very interesting time in our humanity, Philip, and I feel with you and I, we can dive straight in, and many people watching can, look at the links after, go and explore your books, from Radical Wholeness, New Self, New World. And I mean, you've been showing up and just, through your facilitator training, through your workshops, you've been going on a journey now for a few years, really welcoming people back into their body, a sense of real embodiment. And I think one of the things that always drew me to you was this idea of, radical wholeness, this idea of what does it really mean to be whole, to be I would call that sort of a sovereign being. Maybe that would be a term that I use sometimes. And I'm fascinated with the body. I'm very much into dynamic meditations and just coming back into the body. And right now, I'd love us to dive in around that, but also with what's happening on the bigger body of the world, right? Which I know you referenced many times. I read your little piece on COVID-19, with COVID-19 meaning us. That was a beautiful essay around, what is the world, what opportunities is the world showing us right now. And I don't want us to dismiss, Philip, that there's so many people experiencing trauma right now. I'm receiving many messages of people in shock, in fear, and really, the rug's being pulled under their feet on so many levels. And just whatever bubbles from a little bit of that, let's dive in.
Yeah, I mean, it's a hugely disorienting time. And in a way, what it exposes is the expectations that we've come to expect. Do you know what I mean? We have this idea of what normal is. And in a way, our attachment to that system just moving forward, I think has dulled us to some of the consequences of it moving forward. And so, excuse me, here we are at this standstill, this strange quiet. And yeah, in the quiet, there is fear, there is anguish. And that's close to me. My mother died 2 days ago, and it wasn't COVID related, but we were so careful. And she died at home, and she died in the arms of my brother, which, what could be, God, more loving as a way to pass. But that hole that is felt in your life, and I was able to go and see her, but to imagine her, locked up in an institution, suffering and incapable of feeling the touch of someone's hand, the immediacy of someone's voice. So we're in this turmoil of disruption, and my hope is, with the world unplugged from this go imperative, that we will come back to ourselves in a way that encourages a reassessment. I think if we if we remain committed to just firing up the old system as quickly as we can, we will dishonor the pain and the grief and the death that this has brought us.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, I'm just feeling into your mother passing at the moment. I'm just
Yeah,
really,
thank you.
yeah, just really, yeah, I heard the other parts after that, but as soon as you mentioned your mother passing and being in your brother's arms, I was sort of catapulted into my granddad passing in my mum's arms. And yeah, that just hit me.
Yeah.
It just hit me.
And that, that human contact,
Mm,
that's where it happens.
mm,
And here we are, with my mom arranging a funeral. Well, there are only 9 people allowed to come to the graveside. And then you're practicing social distancing. And it's taken away expressions that are so necessary to our humanity.
mm,
And I think in doing that, it asks us to revisit what really matters
mm,
in your life and how to nurture that and care for it and carry it forward.
mm. Yeah, that's a real, that's an interesting one. There's a lot coming up for me from that, Philip, which I'd love to hear. So this idea of, so even this idea of, yeah, like you said, only 9 people allowed a funeral, and this sense of like really wanting to honor life by this idea that, there is a potential that we can, there's a contagion around right now. And there's a part of me, and maybe it's it's not a it's not an immature, or what's the word, um when you yeah, it's not a stupidity, but I don't know how I would deal with that. I feel like I don't know how I would deal with that based on some of the information that I'm also experiencing and hearing, and from so many different people, from the likes of doctors, scientists, and whatnot. Not just, not fake news and just the mad media that's gone crazy at the moment online. But there's a real part of me that really feels that while there is a, virus, in the terms of a coronavirus, which is, there's many forms of coronavirus, and I know there's been this whole link with the normal flu that comes every year and wipes out, thousands of humans, and that, this could be a strain that is definitely slightly more aggressive, let's say. But there's a part of me that feels like, for example, if I was to go back right now, I probably just wouldn't, unless my mum really wanted me to, I wouldn't social distance from her. There's a rebel in me that would be like, I'm sorry, but I'm not social distancing from her. And, that's just how I feel. And I would check in with my mum. And I mean, I know in this instance, everyone has to trust their own intuition, but there's something in me, Philip, and I don't want us to get in, we're not going to go into um, different facts for people on here and what people believe and not, but there's something in me that really feels like, ooh, I can't fully trust this in my body. And when you talk about body, Philip, I can't fully trust this in my body. And that's just, that's just how I feel at the moment. And that's why I wanted to call you in today as well, because I know you talk so much about rekindling the connection to our intuition. And I feel that we've lost that as a species.
Absolutely. I mean, all we seem to be able to live by are rules and the right ideas of how to be and how to act and what to do. And so, you can stand at 2:30 in the morning at a red light wanting to cross the street, and there's not a car in sight, but the light is red. So do you stay there,
Right.
or do you say, no, I'm safe? So I did.
I'm sorry, I just want to say that is a great example. That's a beautiful metaphor, because I've seen people stop, you know, No, no, really. I'm a kind of crazy jaywalker. I mean, in China right now, I will get arrested instantly, right? You can't even jaywalk. As soon as you jaywalk, you get charged on your credit card, right? But like,
Wow.
yeah, as soon as it's the social control in there is immense right now. I watched a video on it. But anyway, you was in the flow, but I love that metaphor. Like, that is such a great example of like, do I still stop at 2 in the morning, or do I think I got to get home and I can just walk across the road right now?
Yeah, and I can check in with my own truth and carry forward in ease and clarity. So, to take the example then of my mom, I didn't practice social distancing with her. I arrived at her house. I had a shower. I had a clean change of clothes. So I took off my clothes, put them in a bag, had a shower, pulled it. So I was meticulous in the care I took and absolutely felt right to be beside her and hold her hand and joke with her and be present to her in
Mm.
that way.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel that that's really, I like that. There's that sense of really tuning in and going, okay, what feels true to me based on what I've received. Because the other thing, Philip, as well, is that many people are receiving very, very, very different
Um,
information, perspectives. They have a different filter of life. They have different life experience. I mean, look at you. If anybody wants to look at your life journey, the bravery, the courage, the sort of out of the box life that you've lived from a young age, the way you've questioned life. We all come at life from a very different angle, right? So we also have to take that into account. And I for one, for anyone listening, I'm really tuning in to not just point fingers, blame, judge, because at the moment, judging gets heightened in this shadow work, right? The shadows are out right now. It's like, certain so-called awake people, or what you want to call them, or let's say with more awareness, of finding themselves all of a sudden in this sort of, you know, energy of judgment, and this is wrong, and you should do that, and you should do that. And everyone's like, wow, it can be quite intense out there.
oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah.
and and I mean, that you have to accept it all and make sense of it for yourself. So the risk, it's a real risk. I mean, people are dying. My brother has friends who've died, and the risk is greatest for those who are most vulnerable. The people who are older, people who have diabetes, who have heart conditions. It's the vulnerable. So there's a thing. No one's going to tell me what to do.
Right.
And well, it's not about that. It's about protecting your neighbor. It's about protecting your neighbor's dad, who, it's about protecting those who are most vulnerable. And then, as a society, we're making huge, huge sacrifices at the moment that are to help the most vulnerable among us. Well, that's if civilization is about anything, my God, that caring for the most vulnerable, that's the hallmark for me of a truly civilized country, or a truly civilized society. And we're reluctant sometimes to recognize vulnerability. We go into the judgment thing. I mean, the 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 poorest among us, they face challenges. I mean, to wake up in the morning wondering where you're going to get anything to eat today. Um, that's something that just wouldn't even occur to most of us. And the the pressures that poverty brings to bear, and our culture, it's so extremely stratified between the rich and the poor, and they live in the same society, and you can't think i'm I've got it made when when your brother doesn't know where he's going to get his next meal. It's not a tenable definition of any society to move forward that way. There's a story. Can I share a story with you?
Of course.
There's a guy, Wade Davis, who is a well-known anthropologist, worked with National Geographic, and was close to a tribe in Borneo, Aboriginal tribe, hunter-gatherer tribe. And the First Nations people, Indigenous people in Canada are really proactive, really feeling their ability to demand justice. And they organized the first ever Indigenous conference where Indigenous people came together. And so Wade Davis was asked to sort of chaperone a group from this hunter-gatherer culture in Borneo. And they came to Vancouver. They'd never been on a plane. They come to this city with skyscrapers and you know, everything gleaming and glittering. And the conference went ahead. And now it's at the end of the conference and they're about to head home. And so Wade Davis looks at them and says, so in everything you've seen, what's the one thing that most surprised you on your trip? And they looked at him and they said, your brothers are sleeping on the sidewalk with nothing to eat and no home to go with. And we look at the wealth of this city and this, we don't understand. How is this possible? How can you do this? Please explain this to us. That's the perspective that we've lost. And in this newly kindled compassion, whereby we come together to keep the vulnerable as safe as possible, my gosh, if we can build on that, then something new is possible.
Yeah, that's worthy of a real deep breath, because as you this is why there's so many ways to perceive what's unfolded, and I feel that if we can take that a broader perspective, because you know, as I say again, when I hear when you spoke firstly and then you brought that story in, which is beautiful. When you spoke firstly, I was like, oh well, we want to all of a sudden take care of our closest, because it's like, you know, this might affect my gran, or this might affect my child, right? And I've seen a lot of posts popping up like that. Wow, you know, I want to protect my nearest and dearest. And I feel that when we go out and go, well, okay, whether or not this strain of the coronavirus is more deadly than the normal flu or not, right? Which, because that's definitely open to further investigation, which will continue over these coming months, I'm sure. But every single year, every single day, as you just described, our brothers and sisters the vulnerable are being forgotten about. Of course, there's certain institutions and certain people that really go out there and try to make a difference, no question. But as you said, the balance of that is massively out of proportion. And so, yes, if we can take how we've reacted now and then bring that in as a sort of as a rewiring of a subconscious program into our awareness, that's definitely a positive. And that could create immense change. And then at the same time, there's a sort of, and I don't like to play too much doubt, there's a sense of, somebody wrote a beautiful article the other day about, you know, this idea of gaslighting, where, you know, all of a sudden people come out of this first phase of what's unfolded right now, and they just want to run straight back to the familiarity and the safety of what has been before them, and they want to get back to so-called normal as quick as possible, because, you know, that's where the nervous system can calm down, because they're supposedly back into the safe zone, right? And I don't know if you're aware of the polyvagal theory, but the idea of you know, the green and amber, which was the fight and flight. But now there's a sort of new phase, right? That a man has brought through this freeze phase, this real the red zone, yeah. And when we're in the red zone, even the amber zone, but when we're in the red zone, disassociation, you know, we are out. We can't hear properly. We're in massive numbness, shutdown, and so on. And so at the moment, many are in that space, Philip, and it's like, you know, to bring them back into the green zone where they can actually make rational decisions and critical thinking and so on. I mean, that in itself is a process, because depending on, you know, what your life has been before will determine how much is required for you to come, because you can't just catapult back to the green zone, right? It doesn't work like that. It's not like, oh, I'm in the red now, I'm in the green, oh, everything's okay. It doesn't work like that. There's a sort of, you know, there's an aftershock, right? There's a process that has to take place to come back into that green zone where they can start to really, you know, again, I use the word critical thinking. So for me at the moment, I'm just noticing so much out there, Philip, of I guess also the the pain that can come from this distancing, social distancing for too long, right? And there's many different variants of how we can come back together, but it does feel like there's this sort of sense of separation happening, conflict happening, which is also an opportunity for us to look at our shadows, look within, look at the collective shadow. And I just feel, I'm hoping that narrative that you're talking about, the narrative of looking at this as a great opportunity to cleanse, purify, refine, and rise anew, right? But I'm a raging optimist, you know this, right? And, or, you know, we have to just be in a sense of awareness to see what does move over these coming months. Because, you know, there's a lot of talk of many different agendas that are also trying to come in place, and legislations and statutes and all this other stuff, as I'm sure you've been aware of, from mandatory vaccines to, you know, this, that, and the other. And I feel that coming back to our real sovereign state, what does that look like? You know, how can we make conscious decisions that serve ourselves, but also include the whole?
Yeah, I mean, to me, you know, making conscious decisions, being rational, is grossly misunderstood, because we've been so trained to have the head take charge,
Right.
and we lose the body. And I think in that, you know, in that time of disorientation and amber and red, as you talk about, what's happening is an increasing dissociation from the body.
Right.
And and so the separation that's going on is primarily a separation from the self and the present that has you in its embrace. It's so hard to come to rest in the present and feel its life holding you when the adrenals are firing.
Right.
And the if we hadn't so grossly misunderstood what human intelligence is, you know, coming back to conscious awareness would mean coming back to wholeness, would mean how can I face this and be with this with the whole of my being.
Mm.
But, you know, we're a traumatized culture to begin with.
Right.
If trauma is earmarked primarily by a dissociation from the body, then we're all traumatized. We've
Right.
all done
Totally.
that.
Yeah.
That's how we live.
Yeah.
And so then to have this piled on top of it, what we tend to do, our programming tells us to take charge and judge, this is good, this is bad,
Right.
and implement the right decisions according to some schema that is unconnected with what the body knows.
Right.
And I think what the body most deeply understands is that it belongs to the world, that there is kinship everywhere. You know, the body feels the presence of a tree and feels it as a spiritual ally.
Right.
And we've, in our sort of frenetic anxiety, we lose all sense of kinship with the world. And so then our, that impulse you talk about, how can I protect my grand? How can I protect my, well, our whole focus is on protecting humans and the human economy and the GDP, and the most vulnerable are the fish that whose bellies are filling with plastic and are dying of starvation, and the frogs and the birds whose habitats are being, I mean, these are the most vulnerable kin that we have. And to think that our lives are in any way separate from theirs is to fall prey to the thought of the multi-billionaire who doesn't yet have enough money and needs more and feels entitled to more, and feels that the janitor sweeping the floor obviously doesn't have what it takes to make it.
Right.
But that's us with nature, and what our way of being does to nature is perfectly analogous to what the COVID 19 is doing to human society.
Mm.
The pain we're feeling is the pain of this foreign intrusion that our intelligence doesn't know how to process, doesn't know how to deal with.
Mm. Right.
And that the plastics, the pollution, the habitat destruction, the intelligence of those delicate parts of the web of life that are being unraveled, they're being confounded, and the agony of that. And even, I mean, to say that our way of being is analogous to COVID-19, I have nothing against hunting, but you take the average North American hunter and he's going out to shoot a deer, and he doesn't want a sick deer or an injured deer. He wants the biggest buck with the biggest set of antlers. Well, that's the leader. Nature doesn't take down the strong. Nature takes for itself the weak. And here's our avarice, our entitlement, depriving the herd of its leader, shattering its social cohesiveness. And so the analogy with COVID is just, it's so strong that if we can understand our most taken for granted activities as a form of toxicity, if we can feel the pain of that, then there's a reason to change. If we don't, Greta Thunberg doesn't know anything that all of us don't know already. She hasn't got some new information, but she feels the pain of the earth with every cell of her body. It's the capacity to feel that will enable us to promote change.
Right. So yeah, that leads in. There's a lot there. Mm. The capacity to truly feel creates great change. I mean, even if just being with what you shared at the end, I mean, like I have this capacity, we use the word conscious awareness to see, the bigger picture, let's say, and the interconnectedness of all things. And as you know, I'm a great, yeah, I just have a lot of admiration for Charles Eisenstein and the way that he described the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, and the way he talks about the story of interbeing and really that in between stories that we are as a collective, as a species. And And there's a part of me that even if I go back to 2006, 7, before that, and the literature I was reading, and then, you know, the few peak moments that really drove me, what they actually drove me from a state of, let's say, awakening, which awakening for me is not just a spiritual thing. It's like seeing something new for the first time, right? A paradigm shift is where all of a sudden you're seeing something, having a complete new reframe and going, oh my Lord, I never even, you know, perceived anything like this was possible or happening, right? And then from there, it led me into a series of uncovering, through documentary after documentary, a number of things that were really atrocities that are happening on our planet. From, you know, like you just mentioned, from the, you know, shark fishing to, you know, food, to pharmaceuticals, to, you know, suffering of our native people, of our ancestral path. I mean, you know, a real took me into like a real depths of some of the darkness, and probably still, Philip, scratching the surface on many levels, you know. But that year or so took me into that. And then really what drove this desire to share more love in the world, or this evoking truth in the world, is my only response was, how do I purify that which is the lie in me, the suffering me, the shadows in me? What do I require doing in order so that that can purify from my system, right, as a micro macro? And what can I offer the world to contribute to this more beautiful world, to a world where, you know, many of the things you've spoken about, right? And then what I'm seeing now, and it's been sparking quite a bit of pressure in my solar plexus, and some rage and some anger really bubbling, where it feels like there's another wave of that right now, what I was looking at. And now everyone's got to look at some of these shadows, right, from what's really going on the planet, how we are being controlled. And then, yeah, I'm just feeling the friction of that. And at the same time, today, I mean, from seeing you this morning and having this little exchange is already being such a balm for me. But yesterday I could feel a lot of anxiety feel in my body, a lot of like, you know, like what's you know, what's going on with these. And I want to come back to what you said, but noticing this having to face the confinements that we as a collective, you use COVID-19 as a sort of, let's say, a metaphor of how we've been treating ourselves and one another, right? And however that's come in, whether that came in from, you know, the truth of what we're being told, whether it was orchestrated, well, it doesn't matter, right? It's in there, right? Because it's in there now, right now. It's like right now we don't know fully, but, you know, it could be a number of different things and everyone's confused. So regardless of that, it's here, it's happening. Everyone's experiencing what they're experiencing. And so now I'm wanting to go, how can that support us to feel empowered to really look at how we create new systems, a new world, as you would call it, a new self, new world, right? What, and maybe, I don't know, you can speak to anything that's popped up here, but what is required, would you say, Philip, from how you've been working with people, for individuals that may be listening to this call today, what is required to not just catapult elastic band back to what was, but to actually look at what can be?
I think we need to understand the self in a completely different way. We are told that we are each essentially alone. And I mean, there is no aloneness in the world ultimately. Like, everything I experience ripples into the world and is felt there in some way. Everything that happens into the world ripples through me and is felt through me. There's no separation. There's no isolation. But as soon as I accept that I am essentially alone, there's this row of dominoes that starts falling. And the first domino to fall is, well, if I'm alone, then my experience is strictly private. It's not shared. It's just felt within me, and it's my experience. And then my number one job in life is to supervise that experience and get it right and make it feel good and flatter it and make it a success. So I begin to move into division, where there's a part of me that is obsessed with me and with getting it right and making it safe. And it's like I take the spotlight of my attention and I turn it off the world, and the world is cast into darkness, and I shine it on myself. And now I'm in this divided state where, most of my thoughts are about my own thoughts, where my concern is bound me in self-consciousness, where a part of the self is conscious of the other part of the self. And when I'm in self-consciousness, my number one relationship in the universe is between the divided parts of myself. That's what occupies me. That's where most of my attention is devoted. And how to wean away from that self-absorbed and darkened notion of what the self is to a relationship where you feel your primary relationship as your relationship with the present. Now, we are confounded in weaning our attention away from the self and onto the world because we have sacrificed our ability to feel wholeness.
Mm.
And there's this glaring paradox where reality is only wholeness. That's all there is wholeness. And we have desensitized ourselves to wholeness to such an extent that we've forgotten what it means to speak from the wholeness of our being. We've forgotten what it means to listen from the wholeness of our being. We don't know what it is to feel the self in its wholeness. So when I talk about embodiment and describe what embodiment is, I think it's essentially a surrender to a larger intelligence.
Mm.
And the brain in the head and the intelligence of the body are vastly out of proportion. The intelligence of the body processes 1 billion times more information than I can be consciously aware of. So the first surrender to that larger intelligence is the tyrant, the ruler, the supervisor in the head, dropping out of that isolation that the cranium affords and into that teeming intelligence of the body. But the second surrender to the larger intelligence is that the body itself is attuned to the world. The body is a resonator. I mean, we've stuffed it the way you might stuff a bell with cotton balls, and it no longer resonates to the present. And so we don't feel the present. I mean, it's all the time running through us. But we've dulled ourselves to that. So we've contracted our awareness from the wholeness that supports our every breath and onto this fantasy of the isolated self. And that can only be ruinous to the whole. If you don't feel the whole, you won't feel the damage you're doing to it.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. Beautiful. I got tingles in my body, and also I've got as always with our conversations, I'm being like pulled open, and as you're talking this, as you said, surrender, I just heard the word death, and there was this sense of, as much as it's almost like there's a dying to the actual self, right? Especially the individual limited perspective of the self, the me mentality, which we've termed many things in from different people, some call it the ego and so on, but the way you described it is much more, as you said, that wholeness of being. What sort of come by me, if I can capture this, I was having lots of visuals there as you were speaking, was that actually then when we look at our structures in place, from borders, from the way that we're being governed, the way we're allowing ourselves to be governed, the systems in place that have been, you know, agreed to, you know, unconsciously or not, right? Even consciously on some terms. And then the way that we inhabit and are living in, most of the time, apartments, right? Apart, you know, apart from everyone, apart from myself, because how you described it, I mean, you know, I'm only concerned about me, myself, my own survival, and I must be in my loneliness and alone, so therefore I can't, you know, I can't actually connect. And so then it's sort of, from that perspective, so much of what we're seeing, if we shifted our point of focus from that individual, well, just what you described, I don't need to replay it, everybody just heard it, to that sense of wholeness, if we shift our point of focus to what that really requires and what has to die and what we have to lose, let go of and surrender to, then all of a sudden something else emerges anyway, right?
Yeah.
It's, yeah, there's an
Yeah,
emergence. Yeah, go.
absolutely. Well, I was just going to say there's a huge mythological context to this, which has to do with the polarity between male and female, and has to do with the tension between the hero and the tyrant. So Joseph Campbell described the tyrant. It's such an acute, precise description. The tyrant is the man of self-achieved independence. And that's the contraction of the tyrant into the castle, of the self into the head. It is at the same time a withdrawal from the female.
Mm,
So we have denigrated the female and dismissed it and ignored it and neglected it. And the female, you know, I feel in my body this fabulous male intelligence that abstracts and discerns and gains perspective. And in the body, there is this intelligence that is connected and relational and knows how to integrate and feel the world and place me in the present.
mm,
And what we've done is, you know, historically, our center of awareness has moved out of the body into the head.
mm,
And we've moved away from the mother as the center of our culture to the father. And we've moved away from the goddess to the god, and away from the earth to the sky where God lives. And this is a long, long story, but we're stuck in it the way a fly is stuck on flypaper.
mm,
And it feels safe. It feels safe to disengage from the world and protect yourself. Because if the world can't get to you, it can't hurt you. But the very concept of safety is a primary concern of the tyrant who wants immortality, basically, and fears death. And it's an illusion,
right,
safety.
right,
I mean,
exactly.
I've noticed, I don't know about you, Simon, but I've noticed that if you're alive, you're not safe.
Right.
You're going to get hurt. You're going to get sick. You're going to get injured. You're going to die. Life isn't safe. And what happens is, I mean, the tyrant recognizes that. We as a culture recognize that. And then the conclusion we draw is that, well, maybe if I'm less alive, I'll be more safe.
Right,
And we contract.
right. Because we
And
deny it.
yeah. And the world, you know, I talk about the world resonating through your being. You have a unique cluster of gifts. No one has ever had these sensitivities, these gifts in this way. And the world is whispering to you to put those into service. And as long as we've dulled the body and rendered it insensate, we're deaf to that whispering. And
Right,
it's only as those are activated that we move forward as individuals and as a culture.
right. Beautiful. Yes, so beautiful. Tingles again on my arms. Look at my arms are just tingling right now. No, really. And it's not just, it's not, I know you don't even, it's not even about, you know, acknowledging the individual here. I'm talking about, like, if we don't start having these dialogues from the from the wholeness speaking, right? How does the wholeness speak, right, in any given moment? Because I noticed how when I just yesterday I was in so much closure and stubbornness and went into that feeling all of that density for the day, and then shut off my partner and shut off everything else for a moment. And like you said, it goes into that place where the illusion of safety, of like, I'm going to be okay over here, I take care of myself, but you feel completely dead. You're dead. You're not alive. You're a dead person walking. You can't even enjoy the beauty of the leaf, you know, that is shining and permeating in front of you, or the birds dancing in the swimming pool. You know, you miss them. You miss them. You forget about them, right? There's like almost like an amnesia, right? You can, you know, and that's actually, and if you go back as far as Plato, many others, right? There was this collective neurosis, right? There's a sort of you know, a sense of you know, feeling so desensitized, right, from life. And I mean, I know you just said this, but you know, I've used the term many times of like dead. You know, it feels like the life force has been sucked out of so many of our brothers and sisters, right? And I always describe everyone I meet as a divine being, right? And I say, you know, you are a divine being, a miracle. Nobody ever has been created in the light that you are, right? And often, Philip, there's a blankness at first, because people are like, they're like, wow, I've never even like I've not even considered that. There's a sense that they haven't considered that, right? That they are that miraculous just for being, regardless of whether you've got studied, or you've got anybody knows you, or you've got friends, or, you know, just the essence of your being. And that's been somehow, and you know, again, it's been sucked out of us. And actually that is so clear for me why billions of us will allow ourselves to be controlled by fear, by dominance, by systems and structures that
And
clearly don't.
dogma. And
Dogma,
yeah,
exactly. Clearly they don't serve us. And there's a knowing inside that, like, there's something off here. Is this really serving us as a collective? You know, and it's like, no, it's not.
we are, we are, we have been rendered blind to wholeness.
Yeah.
And when you don't feel wholeness, you are insensate to its guidance.
Mm.
There's guidance in every moment. It's there. Fall into it, surrender to it, feel it, and ride it. But when you don't feel that guidance, all you've got is idea and reactivity.
Right.
That's all you've got. And reactivity is so different from responsiveness. Reactivity is unintegrated energy that is reacting.
Right.
A response is a harmonious ripple through the whole. And when there is no wholeness, there cannot be response. There's just reactivity and the clinging on to idea as though it could save you. It could make things right.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. Reactivity to idea that can save you. And then again, in the illusion that you even need saving, because in the wholeness, there's nothing to save, right?
No, no. And your being isn't shut down at the border of your skin. Your being is what you discover when you're fully present.
Mm.
That's your being, including the leaf and the birds playing in the pool.
Mm.
It's all part of your being at this moment. And to open the gates and feel that expansive, spacious play and be still within it. Within that stillness, you will feel this subtle, gentle joyous activation, and that is the fuse of your life.
You know what? I'm tingling all over. I love it because you know, it's you know why I'm laughing. I know you know why I'm laughing, but for people watching, I did a talk recently with another beautiful being. Everyone's a beautiful being, of course, but like it was another beautiful being, and it's the play. It's the divine play, right? And as you was just saying that as that playfulness comes in, and that that dissolution, that no longer identifying to everything else we've mentioned along here. I saw loads of people dancing, Phil, and as you was talking, they were just dancing in so much joy and celebration of their wholeness that anything else cannot actually attach to that, because the frequency itself cannot survive in that, because it's like, well, we are not that. We are not that, and oh my Lord, my body's tingling like crazy right now, right?
So can I share something
Course,
with you that is
yes.
so pertinent? One of the thinkers who most deeply looked into play for me was Donald Winnicott, who was a psychiatrist in England and wrote books on it. And he talked about play as the one activity in which the whole of the personality is present. So play is on the side of wholeness. And the opposite of play, for Donald Winnicott, is compliance.
Wow.
The
Tingles.
opposite of play. And so, and that's what we've got in our culture, is compliance to the right ideas, the dogma, the dissociation, the contraction of the self into this dark cell. Compliance and play. You take your pick.
Wow. I
And if
love.
you're
Go.
Yeah, just if you're looking for safety, you will comply.
Right.
You want to be safe. What are the rules? What should I do? How should I do it? You're looking for a top-down solution.
Right. Right. And if you are in the play of life, if you are in the freedom of wholeness, you are trusting that present moment where you don't, the many personas don't exist in that moment anyway. And therefore you are governed and sovereign in that, trusting that whatever comes up in any given moment will be there to support your existence in whatever that looks like. And if that is the dissolution of you in that moment, that's also the divine play of that wholeness, right? There's a complete, wow, I'm so like, at the moment things are dropping and so beautiful. That's why I love talking to you, and I hope anybody watching this can really play with us through this conversation and see, because I just saw again, and I know you and I are all about play, even why we were so impassioned by theatre, right? You and I both have a love of theatre, and in that divine play, as Shakespeare's popping up now, and many other players, you know who's coming into my mind? Charlie Chaplin is coming into my mind. You know, there's the sense of, in these dire times where it feels that all of a sudden everything's being taken away from us, if we can rise as that true playfulness, not as a substitute as trying to make out I am playing, but a genuine freedom of surrender to come into that divine play, there is such a freedom in that actually empowers others to realize that we are not confined. That's basically what's popping up. Yeah.
No. And being is essentially spacious.
Right.
And when you come back to your wholeness, you surrender to the spaciousness of your being. Right? And play is spacious, and compliance is a contraction. And you just feel the diminution and separation that happens with that withdrawal from the
Mm.
spaciousness of being.
Mm.
And the irony for me is that the more you retract from the spaciousness of being, the less you'll feel the security of being.
Mm.
Right? I mean, there's only one security, which is the security of your being now,
Mm.
here in this place. And it's such a different thing from the safety that we're taught to want. And when you're looking for safety, you look for the political leader who has the iron fist and is gonna make things right.
Right.
Right. God, you
Right,
know.
right. And I'm just seeing all the many different, military leaders, political leaders in our, in let's go over the last, whatever, 100 years. And you see that actually everybody was, even the ones that afterwards, many years later, they realized, why the hell was I even following this? But you've just described it, the sheer fear and need for safety. It's like, and the density of that war and control and manipulation and dominance. And then, oh wow, we have a we have a 7-year daughter. It's not my daughter, Dara's daughter, but she's my teacher, my guru. And I've been with her for 6 years of her 7 years of life. And just as you were talking, I was seeing her play in the many times that she's played. And I was thinking of me playing, and what she evokes through her playfulness is spaciousness, right? Right? And you know this, you have children, there's a spaciousness in playing, and it was just seeing that. And then I was noticing at times my own density in my compliance to go and do something, right? Whatever it might be, the doing persona of like, I need to do this or get this done, and how my energy becomes dense, not spacious. Anyway, that was just some visual that popped up as you were speaking.
And it's, yeah, you know, the question for me is or the, not even the question, the passion, the appetite, the love within me is to connect with reality, to connect with this reality and dance with it and play with it and feel it. And the only way to connect with reality is to surrender to the wholeness. That's, if you can't feel the present as a whole, and it's amazing in our culture how people struggle with that. They go to 5-day retreats to try to feel the present in its wholeness. All it is whole. There's nothing else to it but wholeness. Right. And if you can't feel the present in its wholeness, you're not feeling the present. You're feeling bits and pieces of it.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But
You're feeling almost, again, going back into concepts or ideas. You're actually going into the ideas again, as we spoke. The presence is an idea, right? Or like, oh, I'm doing presence now, or I'm actually, whereas actually that is all it is. It can't be anything but that. So what we're actually dying to is anything that is blocking us from that truth of who we are.
Yeah, that's our reality.
Yeah.
And what's happened in our culture is we've got it backwards. We think reality is a sort of unification of differences. And reality is actually a differentiated unity. It's like all it is one with these gorgeous differentiations that blossom as a flower or a beetle or a soaring eagle. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's take a nice deep breath in on that.
It's such a joy. It's such a joy jumping around with you on this and seeing what bursts forth.
Yeah. Yeah, really. So much gratitude. And yeah, I feel full and nurtured. And I really appreciate you for, yeah, holding me in this time, and what I want to share and express and allow through me, so that so that spaciousness can be truly felt once I'm being allowed to express myself. So I really, yeah, I want to acknowledge that. And if there's any, I mean, I feel very complete. I get a sense that you feel very similar, but I want to just offer you, if there's any passing words that you either, anything you want to share to those listening to us today, or in our completion, feel free now.
Well, I might add one thing.
Yeah.
That there is a dilation to being that enables the spaciousness. And that dilation is supported by a gathering. And it's a gathering of your center, the center of your awareness. And where it gathers most tangibly, most securely, is deep in the pelvic bowl for me. And so there's this, again, it's this marriage of complementary opposites, the spacious dilation and that gathering of the still point within that feels it all.
Mm. Yeah, and stay there. Then let's stay there. I love that. Stay there. So when you say the pelvic bowl, for those listening, I have a little and how to. I never really like the how. I don't like asking the how. It's normally a what and the why for me, and the how becomes too mental. But like in terms of that gathering and enabling us, for maybe people listening to you for the first time, or to us, and is there a little practice or a little invitation of how people can at least just drop into that space, Philip? Is there something that pops up that we could offer people that have been with us this far?
Let's give it a try. Let's give it a try. I just like to say that the more gently you allow yourself to try it, the more clearly it will unfold for you. In our culture, we try to make things, we have an idea of what should happen, and then we try to make it happen. And that is so opposite to what this work is about. But
Right.
I talked earlier about how our center rose out of the body into the head. And that happened, began in the Neolithic Revolution, 6,000 BC or so. And we're now so high in the head. But you can reverse that journey.
Mm.
And to reverse that journey, I spoke of the pelvic bowl, the pelvic floor, which is at the very base of your trunk. And it's where, the anus and the genitals and the perineum are. It's that fecund realm of life that we are so terrified of
Mm.
in our culture. Well, at the very center of the pelvic floor, which I experience as the ground of my being, when I come home to myself, it's to the pelvic floor I return. And more specifically to the perineum, which is at the center of the pelvic floor. And the perineum, when I speak of the still point, it's in the perineum I find it. And so that gathering into the perineum enables the dilation of awareness.
Mm.
So if you're not sure where your perineum is, it's in a different place for men and women. For men, it's right between the anus and the genitals, at the very center of the pelvic floor. For women, it's close to the vaginal opening, which is why the perineum can tear in childbirth. But either way, you engage the perineum to stop yourself from peeing. It's
Mm.
a very familiar thing. So I'll give you a few minutes and talk you through this. Begin by allowing the breath to gently brush across the pelvic floor. So just release the back, the lower belly, the hips. and feel the life of the breath like a rainfall on parched earth, and it hits the pelvic floor and life answers. And feel the perineum as specifically as you can. Locate it in your awareness. Just bring the whole of your awareness to the perineum and feel its presence. And then feel opening up through the body, rising from the pelvic floor, a spacious corridor. And it unfolds within the body, and it opens and it opens and it opens, eventually all the way to the top of the head. And so you feel that spacious corridor through the body and the perineum at the very bottom, at the very center of it. And up in the head, locate the center of your awareness, the center of your thinking, the center from which you notice the world. And allow it to show up in any way it needs to. It might be just a little felt center of energy. It might show up as a pearl or a diamond or who knows what. But feel it there, locate it there. And allow it to come into relationship with the perineum so very far below it. So it's as though each recognizes in the other its counterpart. They feel each other, and as they feel each other, there is a glimmering of love between them. And you feel that love as a bond, as a gravity. And the center of the awareness in the head releases to that love, and it begins to drop. And it floats down through the body. It descends gently, slowly, patiently, smoothly, the way a pebble tossed into a pond seeks the bottom. And it just drops. It drops, being called by the perineum. And if it stalls out, if it seems suddenly reluctant to go further, understand that you've encountered a little gift. There's a little shadow in the body that you might not otherwise have been aware of. And that shadow is like an orphan. And just like an orphan, it needs your love. It needs your unconditional acceptance. It needs to be seen and felt just as it is. And as you offer those qualities to it, it will soften and disperse. And at a certain point, the center of your awareness can resume its descent. And at a certain point, it will begin to drop into the realm of the pelvic bowl and still drop, called by the gravity of the perineum. And you will feel the moment when the center of your awareness comes to rest on the perineum. And just check in with the perineum, just gently engage it, because sometimes you're an inch or so above it, and that last little bit of the drop is transformational. And feel the center of your awareness come to rest on the perineum. And understand that the center of your awareness is at rest in a realm that doesn't need language. And it feels everything. It attunes to the world. And at the very center of the perineum, there is a stillness. And that stillness attunes to wholeness. And you cannot grasp wholeness. You can't objectively know it, but you can feel it. And that feeling requires a surrender that allows the center of your awareness to fully come to rest on the perineum without expectation, without design. And as you rest there, I just encourage you to notice any sense of dilation, a sense of ease, a sense of softening into and welcoming the present moment, the world around you. And that, for me, is the gathering that makes the spaciousness possible. The spaciousness supports that still point. The still point supports the dilation.
Wow. I feel super zen now. That was, it's yeah, I know that point, of course, myself, and in terms of being guided there with your beautiful voice as well, and the way you just guided me there, and hopefully others joined us listening. Yeah, there's no words. So much falls away, and I could verbalize stuff that may or may not have happened, but just dropping into that space, as I've done before. Of course, it's not the first time, but there's just so much drops away, and that spaciousness can be felt. So beautiful. And what
I
go on, please.
was just going to say, we started the conversation talking about simplicity.
Right.
There it is. There
Right.
it is.
Right. Yeah. Keep it simple. Yeah. So, Philip, but yeah, I think you know how much I love, respect, and have cherished our encounters. And this, for me, the way you've articulated and verbalized this journey into wholeness again, for me, has been a great contribution. And there's some nuggets. I'm going to go back and listen to this, because there were some real nuggets that really fell for me, and enabled me to also come through some of the density, and the what we described was clinging on to me a little. And I feel that there's a release that's taken place on this call. So I really personally am super grateful, as always, to be in your presence. And I hope that this talk really supports those who it needs to support at this time, as we transition out of that density and into our wholeness.
Yeah. And my heart is full of joy and love, as it always is at the end of our conversations. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So there you go. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in and listening to this transparent conversation with myself and Philip. Please, if you've loved it, enjoy it, share it, and also go and explore Philip's website. As always, I don't need to tell you, but you'll find the links where you need to look. And yeah, thank you for being with us today. And whatever you're going through, we hope this brings a little nourishment and healing balm to your personal experience.